We're talking about anatomy of a horse and a horse in motion. And many, many years ago, a veterinarian gave me this bone, which came out of hopefully a dead horse. Um, and it is a horse's leg, a thoroughbred horse's leg. Up here we have the knee, we have the ankle, we have the two sesamoids in the back here, we have the pastern bone, we have the lower pastern bone, and we have the coffin bone, which is this bone here. This is the bone that is inside, that's encapsulated by the foot, by the hoof, and the hoof sits like this. And the amazing thing about a horse's leg, and you have to think about this, is it's holding up 1,400 pounds, and it's not a whole lot bigger than the bone in my forearm. And certainly not a whole lot bigger than the bone in my leg, which has to support a lot less weight than this. And that's what makes the horse such an amazing animal, because the horse can support himself at 40 miles an hour, 1,400 pounds on this. And that's why the suspension in this leg is so important, because we have a whole suspension system in the horse that supports this leg. It starts in the hoof and wraps around this bone, and it comes up through the pastern, and it comes behind the sesamoids, and then up through the leg, and it attaches at the back of the knee. And that's the suspension system that keeps this horse running and keeps this horse in tune. And when we get soft tissue injuries, like a suspensory or an XYZ ligament, the XYZ ligaments are in the lower pastern here. It's generally because a horse hyperextends the leg, and they'll pull that suspensory, and that's usually 6 months on a shelf to get that fixed, and it's not always a successful fix. But this is the inside of the horse's leg, and it's quite interesting, and the horse is just such an amazing animal. Here on the sides we have splint bones, and this is a splint bone. And you see this bone, these bones sit right behind the knee, and they come about halfway down the cannon bone. And you look at that and you say, well, what the heck is that there for? What is that doing? It's an annoyance. It's an annoyance to a trainer, because the suspensory ligament runs over the outside of it, and quite often, if there's a trauma to this bone, you'll get a suspensory trauma as well. And this bone was never a part of the working of a horse today. It has nothing to do with it. But when horses were dinosaurs, when we go all the way back to the dinosaur era, horses, this bone came down here, and they had a toe on this side, and they had a toe on this side. A horse was almost a three-toed animal, and this splint bone has regressed over the years, and now it's just a pain in the neck. When a horse pops a splint, when they get a trauma to this bone, they'll get a very painful lump on here, and we'll have to give them about 60 days off. But that's your splint bone. This is your knee joint. We have an upper joint, which is a moving joint, and we have what we call the lower joint here, which is non-moving joint. This does not move, only the upper. The lower joint, when it is traumatized, generally causes a lot of discomfort and it's not a very successful surgery. Quite often it's career ending. When you get a joint issue in the lower joint of your knee, it's not very good. I mean, some horses will be operated on and come back, but most come back a lesser horse after a lower joint knee injury. Upper joint, very successful, very free moving joint, and it's a very interesting joint. You know, it's if you're going to have a problem with the knee, you want to have it in the upper. This bone is in the back of the knee. They sometimes break, but they have very, very little to do with the functionality of the knee. Now, we were talking about blacksmiths. You see how well balanced a horse needs to be, and this is the coffin bone. But you got to remember, on the outside of the coffin bone, you have a hoof. You have about an inch of hoof wall all around this, and so the horse is actually standing about this high off the ground, and that coffin bone needs to be in concert with the rest of this hoof. So it is so important that you have a good blacksmith, because imagine if your blacksmith cuts the horse's outside or inside a half an inch, this much, wrong. Now you've changed the entire configuration of the coffin joint, and now this horse is actually leaning on the inside of this bone because he's been cut too low on one side. Or if he's cut too low on the outside, he's now leaning on the outside of that bone, and it's going to affect the whole leg. It's going to affect the whole suspension system going up the leg. And we're talking a quarter of an inch, a half an inch. So having a blacksmith that has your feet perfect is such an important thing to the horse, because throwing this off, throwing the bottom of the hoof off, it could be millimeters, is going to have an effect on the way the rest of the leg hits the ground. It's going to have an effect. It's going to cause wear and tear. If you turn this bone a little bit to the left, now you're putting wear on the inside of this bone, wear on the inside of your pastern bone, wear on the inside of your ankle, wear on the inside of your sesamoids, and it's going to go straight up and affect the knees. So it is so important that you have a perfect foot on your horse as well. A blacksmith has a big hand in ruining a good horse or keeping a good horse perfect. And our blacksmith, we have a very good blacksmith. He's a little crazy, but he is a great blacksmith, and he does a great job on our horses. But that's the intricate inside of a horse's leg. And to me, I could never look at this enough. I've been looking at this thing for 20 years, and it just amazes me, all the working parts that are separate. These bones are not attached to each other, held together by the suspension system of the horse and supporting 1,400 pounds at full flight. And it's just an amazing, amazing thing, the way a horse is put together.